Welcome to McGonigal's Chronicles, Making Montana Connections. I'm KRTV and KXLH anchor and reporter Tim McGonigal. For more than 4 decades, a day at the office for Mike Hoggan meant spending time in the great outdoors. His career began in a sheep wagon in the remote mountains of Nevada before moving to Montana, where as a government hunter and trapper for USDA Wildlife Services, he worked along the Rocky Mountain front, dealing with wolves, mountain lions, and grizzlies. He's now sharing his experiences in a book called Between Predator and Prey, 42 Years a Government Hunter. Now retired, Mike lives outside of Valier, Montana with his wife Maureen, where the couple raise Hampshire and Suffolk sheep. It was there where I sat down with Mike to learn more about the book and his extraordinary career. Well, we're proud to be talking today to Mike Hoggan, who is an author and also a government hunter. Mike, the book is called Between Predator and Prey, My 42 Years as a Government Hunter, and that was with the USDA Wildlife Services. But before we get into the book, you're not originally from Montana, but you do have some Montana roots. Tell me, you grew up in Nevada, and how did you eventually make it to Montana?
Well, my great-grandfather, he was a mining boss up out of Phillipsburg in Granite in the 1880s, and that's where my grandmother was raised and her sisters. And after the turn of the century, and there was a lot of people from Butte and Nevada, down around Ely, where I was born, back and forth, with the mining industry. But all the time when I was younger, my grandmother, she was always talking about Montana, and I guess that planted a seed. So in the book, it tells, about how I started on this sheep ranch, and while I was there, I experienced firsthand, what coyotes do, and I met, the government trappers, this and that. And so that's what I wanted to do, and I put in for the job, and I was lucky enough to get it. Well, there's a guy named Mike Laughlin, and he hired me to begin with in 1978. And I worked there 2 years, and from there he went to Wyoming. And he, asked me to join him there. I was single. And so I spent a year in Wyoming, and then from there he went to Miles City. So that was my first experience coming right to Montana, and that was like 1981. And so I worked there 2 years, and then there's a guy that I'd worked with. He was a district supervisor in Nevada. He offered me a job to go back down there. And so I did, and I was there another 8 years, but it was camping out. I mean, 5 days a week I stayed in a sheep wagon, and it was horseback, and I'd gotten married, and it's kind of tough to be away like that. So eventually, in 92, the Wildlife Service specialist that was here in Valier retired. And one of the guys, it was a pilot that I flew with before, called me up, and he said, you should put in for this job. And I was fortunate enough to get it, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah, and 42 years with this line of work, and you've now written this book. Tell me what kind of inspired you to write this book. Because that's an interesting story in itself.
So I retired 5 years ago, and 15 years ago, a friend of mine was talking about this occurrence and about this guy who was up north here, and he had a bunch of sheep, and it was before I got here, and anyway, the coyotes were working him over pretty good. And so one morning he went up there, and there was a coyote eating on a lamb it just killed. So he took his rifle out and he shot at the coyote, and he missed, and he shot an unfortunate sheep that was standing behind it, and coyote ran off, and the sheep were sold. And so his friend was talking about, I said, oh, geez, I forgot that story. And I thought, that was a pretty good story. I can't believe I forgot it. And so I got thinking about it for the next day or two, and my kids were young then, and I thought, I think what I'll do is write some of this stuff down. In the mornings before anybody got up, when I was having coffee, I got a spiral notebook, and because there was a lot of experiences that I had, and as time goes on, you kind of forget certain details. You might remember the gist of the story, but the details you don't. So anyway, I'd sit down there, and it was rough, but I'd write this stuff down and never said nothing to anyone. Just did that, and it took, I don't know how long, but anyway, I compiled quite a few stories together. So anyway, then it was hidden away there for a long time, and so about 10 years ago, my wife Maureen finds this notebook and she's reading it, and she, what is this? And so I told her. She keeps reading it. She says, you got to write a book. I said, no, I'm not going to write a book. And she kept after me. And it wasn't the last time that was discussed, but I was adamant I was not going to write a book. And so it was just before I retired, a little over 5 years ago. And I was up in the Sweetgrass Hills, or Kevin Rim, North Toole County. And one of the ranchers there, he said, you ever read this book? And I looked at it, I said, no, and it was one of the historicals that they did in a lot of towns years ago, of the people and, you know, how they got here and, you know, where they are today. And it was called Echoes from the Prairies. And I kind of thumbed through it, and I know a lot of families up there. And I thought, this would be interesting. And so I brought it home and I was reading it, and it was. And it wasn't just the families that I knew, but the ones I didn't know. I mean, every story in there to me was it, because I've always been kind of a historian. And when I got done with that book, I thought, you know what? That was written in 1976. And if they hadn't have written that book when they did, you know, these stories would be lost. Because at that time, there was people that, you know, old people, the original homesteaders, there was people through the Depression and the hard times. And in this book, you know, it had it all. And so it really got me thinking. And I was getting ready to retire. And I experienced a lot of different adventures, or whatever you want to call them, up here. And so, you know, I told Maureen, I said, all right. I said, let's go ahead and do this. And it took 5 years. And a lot of it was wintertime, was 30 below zero. Sit there and write out a chapter and this and that. And then I'd rewrite it. And then I had a couple of friends that helped me, that had written books. One of them worked for our agency before, and another one, he was quite an outdoorsman, and he'd written a lot of articles and books. But anyway, it just kind of helped, you know, format it a little bit for me. And then it went from there, so.
Okay, and you're fortunate too that your wife is very creative in the, graphics and computers and stuff, and you've got some really nice artwork in the book that really kind of adds to it, I guess, too. So
yes, so not only would we not be having this conversation right now if it wasn't for her, because there would be no book. But she did. She designed the cover. Yeah. She, at the first of every chapter, she did an illustration. Sure. Out of what that chapter was about. She would come up with something, and a lot of people, the book's only been out for a couple months now, but a lot of people say that after they read a chapter, that kind of, well, I got to go to the next one after looking at that illustration, you know, because they are very, very good illustrations that she come up with.
Yeah, so each chapter is a story. I believe there's maybe 30 chapters in the book, and you know, we won't go into every chapter, but in reading about the book, it blends humor, it blends like some real, I guess, harrowing experiences that you had. Tell me about the humorous part of it. Maybe one quick anecdote of humor that you can find in this book.
Well, the first couple of chapters, there's a couple of humorous ones there, but one of them was when I worked on a big sheep ranch before, you know, going to Wildlife Services. I worked ranches all through high school and that, but this one, and they ran 6,400 ewes and 800 mother cows. And so with the sheep, they had all these Peruvian, Basque, Mexican sheep herders, and there was, and this one actually, he came from Guatemala. But anyway, this chapter is about him buying a blow-up doll. Oh my. A lot of people just crack up on that. And anyway, that's one of the better ones. There's humor throughout the whole book, sure, but there's a couple of them, more so than others.
Yeah. And then some scary stories in there too. I'm sure there was some really probably tense times for you on this job.
Oh, you know, there was, but looking back, we were so fortunate, you know, and the people I worked with on the reservation and, you know, on Fish, Wildlife and Parks and that, very, very professional. But there, in anytime you're working with animals, especially grizzly bears, you're going to have some situations come up. But you know, like when all of us old people retired, we kind of look back and think we're very fortunate to have got through it. And it was not only that, I flew a lot in a helicopter too.
Sure.
And I had some excellent pilots, and one in particular that I flew with, and there's some stories in the book that mention our experiences there too. But there again, just somebody's watching out for me.
Yeah. The I guess maybe subtitle of the book is 42 years as a government hunter, and some people might think that they might take that to say you were just out to kill problem animals, but that certainly is not the case. And sometimes you had to do that, but your job is to, I mean, you're a wildlife lover, and so your job wasn't always to just go kill a grizzly bear or kill a wolf. You're trying to help relocate this and have a good outcome for everybody involved, right?
Well, yes. I mean, so when I worked, I had 5 counties, and in the 5 counties, I probably worked 5% of the land mass.
Okay.
And so my job was the phone would ring and somebody had a kill there, had a problem, and whether it be with bears, wolves, lions, coyotes, and I would try to go in there and target those specific individuals. And like the grizzly bear, for example, I always thought that our agency, Wildlife Services, USDA Wildlife Services, did more for the recovery of the grizzly bear than anything, because in my district, 95% of my grizzly bears that I worked with here off the reservation were on private property. And you had to have somebody there that would go in and help those people stop what was happening and target that specific bear. And most of them, 98% of them were relocated. They were just got out of there. But every once in a while we'd have to euthanize one. But, if you didn't have that service, these people are going to do it themselves. They're not going to sit there and watch their livelihood get eaten, So it was a very important program in that respect. And I would kind of joked it was one of the few government programs that you drive in with a government pickup and you might have a little crack of a smile on your face that you're going to be there to help them, So it was, but it wasn't without the controversy and this and that, because not only are you dealing with the ranchers, but you're dealing with the other agencies, you're dealing with the general public, and but anybody that kind of knew what we were doing, they understood the program and why it was so important. The problem I always had was a lot of the publicity we got was negative.
Sure.
And that was one of the reasons too that I decided to write this, to display what this agency did, and how important it was.
And is the agency still in operation?
It is.
It is. Yeah.
It is. Yes.
How has it changed even in the 5 years since you have left?
Oh, it was constantly changing. I always pushed for non-lethal.
Sure.
And like we have this little bunch of sheep, and right in front of the house we have electric pen, and some of this is with cooperation of Wildlife Services, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. There never used to be grizzly bears here, but now there are. So, and even when I was working west, I was, and there's chapters in this book that I explain this, how that electric fence. I used to catch so many bears in bee yards, and once we started using those pens, it stopped. Mm-hmm. And so even like here, so the place is electrified because they're here now, and it saved us a couple times when a bear showed up. But anyway, so I always pushed the non-lethal and the husbandry. If somebody, and I mentioned this in that book too, you pick your carcasses up, don't attract the bears there to begin with, mm-hmm. and things like that.
With the bears, during your time between when you came here to Valier in 1992 and even to today, there's been a much greater presence of grizzlies in that time. And why do you think that is?
Just more and more bears. They do well up here. They always seem to have a lot of cubs. And then the first time I really noticed them coming further out was quite a few years ago. We had a really dry summer. It it was exceptionally dry. And some of these sows pulled down further and brought their cubs. And then once those cubs come down, then that's their home. And then when, it gets saturated up there with bears, and a lot of them younger bears and stuff, they get out of there and they start pulling down. And yeah, now it's even, 35 miles from the front here. I mean, they're just a lot of bears. I mean, so far it's been good right now, but last year at this time, a couple miles away here, there were 7 bears there, 7 grizzly bears.
Okay.
And it's just, not uncommon anymore.
Yeah. One of the bears that you encountered, I believe you have encountered that bear more than once. It was called bear number 666. Tell us the story about that.
Yeah, so I always felt that probably 95% of these grizzly bears do not bother cattle. And the ones that do, sometimes it leads to them to continue to do that. They need to be dealt with. So, before I retired, a couple of years, there was a heifer killed up here on the front. And so I went up, it was the first part of May, and about this time of year. And so I went up and I sat, and I think it was the second night, ended up catching this bear, and it was a male. And so anyway, I kind of felt that was the one that did it, but I worked with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and we talked about it, and they said, well, there's a lot of bears here, it might not be, and it had a point, but I still thought, we'll see. But anyway, so the bear was collared and relocated, and anyway, couple weeks later, whatever, it came back. A lot of times these are moved to the west side, and maybe they come over and they get down on the front, and don't take them long to get home. So anyway, this bear returned, and all of a sudden I've got all these calves being killed up there, and I was the one in the 5-county area at that time that had the say whether livestock was killed by a grizzly bear, a wolf, and now mountain lions are included in that, and maybe black bears. Yeah. But I was the only one that had the say whether this depredation was done by one of these animals, so they could get paid. So like Fish, Wildlife, and Parks or veterinarian or whatever, I mean, we talk about it, but I had the final say. So I would go on up there and I'd find these kills, and anymore. And it wasn't like this. This was another interesting point. When I first started, if I had a bear kill, I had 10 days that I could trap on that kill.
Okay.
To catch that bear. And if it didn't return in 10 days, I pulled my stuff. I mean, and there was places on them creek bottoms you wouldn't go that long. But some of them more in the open. But now anymore, you don't. I mean, them bears, they smell that stuff a long ways, and here they are. And by the second or third day, you might have 10 or 15 bears there. I mean, there's just a lot of grizzly bears here. And so that summer, after that bear was relocated, it had dropped its collar. Well, some of them bigger male bears, they have a large neck, and it's hard to keep a collar on. So anyway, the collar had slipped. Got all these calves being killed, and so the ranchers don't have to check these cattle every day in the summertime. So it might be 2 days later or something, they find this kill, and you can see the bear killed it, and then a lot of times there's other bears there. So I mean, I couldn't set equipment because of all these other bears. I could catch bears, but I wanted to catch the bear that did the damage. So I'd put cameras up, and so I go out and look at the picture of this camera, and here's always the same bear with these 2 ear tags, and so that's that bear from May, and this and that. So anyway, and some of these calves that are being killed were like registered. So the bill kept getting a little higher of the damage being done. So finally, in the first part of October, on a ranch, they had a fresh kill. And I went out there, and I said, okay, we got a good chance now, and I set a couple of foot snares. And the next morning, had the bear captured.
Wow.
And so do you want me to keep going here?
Yeah.
Okay. So I had the bear captured, and it was the same bear, and it was close to 600 pounds.
Yeah.
And so that bear was euthanized, and so after that, and for the next couple of summers, even though there's more bears every year, there was no kills. That bear was responsible for killing all them calves.
Wow.
And so 1st of May till the 1st of October, over $35,000 worth of calves were killed by that bear.
And so, Mike, when we talk about USDA Wildlife Services, farmers and ranchers will actually help pay into that program to to keep it going, right? Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, so, you know, every state's different in the United States, and some of them are almost fully producer funded. I mean, they're overseen by the government and government employees, but the funding comes, I mean, it's catfish farms, it's tree damage, it's airports, you know, where Wildlife Services is there protecting, you know, airplanes from bird strikes. And I mean, there's a wide variety of things that they do. And here in Montana, though, it's mostly livestock. We do airports and stuff too, but so each county is different in Montana, but most of them have what they call a cattle petition and a sheep petition. So these producers pay out of their pocket from 50 cents to $3 a head.
Okay.
That money comes back in and helps fund the program. And a lot of that never gets publicized. You know, if you read an article about Wildlife Services, they never say that, you know, how much money these people put out of their own pocket and how strongly they believe in the program.
It's interesting too, you talk about when you would come in to maybe investigate a cattle death, you try to figure out, was this a bear, was this a wolf? But sometimes it was something that even you couldn't explain. And then we're talking about some of a chapter devoted to cattle mutilations. And some people might maybe scoff at that, but it's a real thing that happens, right?
It is, yeah. So I'll just back up a tiny bit on that. And so this way, it was like a CSI type, you know, Rocky Mountain Front. So every predator has a different way of killing, you know, and it's not 100%, but bears will normally grab something by the back, you know, the back of the neck, up on top. Wolves a lot of times will grab behind the front shoulders, the flanks. Lions will kind of grab up on top towards here, and then lions usually will start by eating the front shoulder, and everything has different feeding pattern. Coyotes at the bottom of the neck. So it just takes years of experience. I mean, there's no school that you're really going to learn this. You know, a lot of it you learn on your own, and after you see enough of it, then we skin them back and we look for hemorrhaging. So if you got teeth marks there and you skin it and there's no hemorrhaging, you know, the meat's like regular color, without the dark purple, then that means that was bit after the animal died. But if that hemorrhaging is there, it's gelatin, I mean, that happened while the animal was alive. So in the 5 counties, and then later we got a guy in Glacier County and another guy in Teton County, but the early days I was just the 5 counties, and like say I was the one that determined all this for compensation, but and then try to figure out which predator did it. But so I would get called in, and then once in a while I'd see these what people would call a mutilation, you know, and in the first years I just kind of take a look. Well, yeah, no, bears didn't do that, and never take pictures. I didn't want to get involved, and then as time went on, well, I back up a little. So the first years that I started, I would have a rash of these mutilation type, you know, livestock in one summer, and then there might be a couple summer that there wasn't any.
Okay.
And so then another summer there was, but the last 15 years it was pretty constant, and it still happens to this day, you know, that these are found. So I would go out and you know, and right off you could tell it wasn't predators, you know, and then I'd skin and I'd look and it's, you know, it was kind of a consistent thing, the side of the head being skinned out. A lot of times the belly was skinned out. The genitals were gone. most of the time the tongue's cut off, so when they take the side of this head, they do with the bottom of the jaw and the tongue's cut off there. A lot of times it's behind locked gates, you know, and in this grass you can see tire tracks and stuff if somebody drove in there. You know, I never see that. It was just kind of some strange stuff.
Yeah. There's a lot of theories out there from people to everything from maybe it's a satanic cult or even aliens. What do you think, or what? I mean, what's causing all this?
Well, I never really talked about this till I wrote this chapter in the book. I'd have people call me, and there was one individual that very persistently called me, wanting me to change my mind and talk to him on this, but I didn't. I thought, no, I don't want to get involved. So when I did the book, I thought, you know, this is something very unique, and I probably looked at more of this than anyone, just because there's a lot of them here, and for as many years as I did it. So anyway, I decided, you know, I thought, you know what, and I picked 5 or 6 of the very best ones. And as far as what did it, I know that predators did not do it. I know, I read someplace where somebody thought magpies could cut like that. What was strange on these, way different than any other livestock, and I looked at livestock almost every day. I mean, this wasn't just something at random, you know, here. I mean, I was almost every day in this 5 counties, I was looking at something that was dead, livestock. And on some of these, there was no flies. There was no maggots, which was really strange in the summertime because, you know, and I never could figure out how they died. I mean, I take my metal detector on some, you know, and I look for bullets. And of course, then I skin them out and look for this hemorrhaging we were just talking about or different things. And one thing that's, you know, oh, and then animals, predators. In one of these stories in this chapter, a month before, wolves had killed an old crippled cow. And within 3 days, between the bears and the wolves and the coyotes, there was nothing left of that cow. Well, a short distance away, here's this big Charolais bull. And you'd have to read this chapter to get all the fine details. But anyway, that bull sat there for a long time before anything touched it. It was a month. But they did finally, it was in the fall. And bears, you know, of course, they're very hungry that time of year. Anyway, they did finally find that and eat it. But, you know, that was really strange. And another thing, and so then you get on the computer and you query cattle mutilation images. And you'll find the same cutting and the same stuff that I looked at all those years in South America, in Europe. And this is something that's not just new. I mean, if you go to Wikipedia, the very first reported cattle mutilation was in the 1660s in England.
Wow.
And you know, of course, through the years, they didn't have the reporting like we do now, and I'm sure they've seen them all the time. But, you know, then they talk about in the 60s, you know, but 70s is when it really, you know, got a lot of attention. And it, like I say, it's still going on to this day. But as far as what does it, I have no clue.
Yeah. Well, it's an unsolved mystery.
It is.
Maybe someday someone will solve it.
Yeah.
Well, you also worked a lot with tribal groups and tribal leaders,
Yes.
and talk about that relationship and the cooperation, and just kind of some of the stories you have from that.
Yeah.
time.
Oh, yeah. That was probably. I always said that some of the very best experiences I had, and the best time of my job was on the reservation. And so they had their own bear crew up there, and they did the bears, but once in a while I'd help them if you know, they needed me. And then when the wolves come along, I took kind of the lead with the wolves, and they'd help with that. And then I did the coyotes up there. But no, it was just really a wonderful experience to work up there, and I have good friends, and to this day, it's just.
Yeah. And we also wanted to talk to you. Our station did a story several years ago about a product that you had been marketing, and it's a humane trap. I mean, a lot of people think of bear traps or coyote traps, and they think it's with the teeth and stuff that will maybe really hurt the animal. But you have a trap that's called the Select-A-Catch. Kind of explain what that is for those that might not remember.
Yeah, so like the teeth traps, they've been they've been outlawed for
Sure.
quite a few years now, but still a lot of people perceive them as not the best. But so, oh gosh, it's been over 15 years ago. Steve Demures in Great Falls, he was one of the guys I worked with, and he came up, he was always inventing something, but he came up with this side pulled foot snare deal, and I looked at that and I said, you got something here. And I said, but if you use a light cable, like the big cables used on the bears, they don't bother nothing. But if you use a light cable, it might cut a little bit. And so we worked together, and I kind of come up with a snare that, it's got the kinkless chain that goes around, so it keeps the circulation going, it won't cut in. And then we came up with a deal with a breakaway, so if you're setting for a wolf and you catch an elk and you got it anchored solid, it'll pop open and let the elk go. And then on the device itself, there's a tension that something lighter go down the trail and step on it won't go off, but a wolf's heavy enough it will. And so I always really strive to make it as good as possible. That's not the word. As humane as possible. Mm-hmm. Doing my job. And so we came up with this, and it's an improvement. I mean, it's maybe not applicated every single place, but there's a lot of places it can be used. We sell a lot to, still in business today, to animal rescue for dog catchers and that, because they catch a dog and it doesn't hurt it, let it go. So,
well, Mike, you said the book's been out for, I guess, a couple months now, and it sounds like the response has been very, very favorable. And you've got some, even I know from Amazon, which is where people can buy it, but they can also buy it in some bookstores around, I think, the Great Falls area, Barnes and Noble, I believe.
Yeah, Hoagland's.
Hoagland's, okay. And but are you surprised by the response?
Oh yeah,
so far.
Totally. So that's like 5 years in the making, like I said earlier. But when it was all done, and we're just going to do it ourselves, and back and forth on and on, and so, and Maureen was we're gonna send it into Dishy Pods or whatever, and when we got done, and I told her, I says, this book might be pretty good. I says, maybe we'll get an editor just to make sure the paragraphs are in the right place, and so we did. We hired a gal, and not only did she format it that way, but there was some paragraphs that I'd have, I said, he said, she said, and she did dialogue, so that made it really professional. And so anyway, when it got out there, I mean, there's people that the response has been overwhelming. There was a guy in Valera the other day that flagged me down, and I'd known him for 30 plus years, and he says, he says, I thought I knew what you did for a living, but I didn't really until I read this book. And like I say, it's got the humor in it. I changed some of the names. Some of the names are, the same, but it turned out good. And I left a lot of the politics and the crap out of it,
Sure.
to make it just a fun read. And it's, it's a world that most people would never get to see, but it's, you can get into it with the book.
Yeah, and after 42 years in the industry, you didn't put every single story in there.
Oh, no.
Will there be another book, a sequel, if the
Maureen says there is,
if it's successful enough?
I'm not planning on it right now, but there is, and there are people that afterwards say, "Why did you put that story in? Why not?" Well, gee, I'm not going to write the Gutenberg Bible here, I just picked, and there's some just as good as this in this book.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe, you never know.
Maybe
what the future
see.
holds.
Yeah, as you look at USDA Wildlife Services. I mean, what's the current status of that agency? Because a lot of government organizations some of them are kind of in limbo right now. Some of them have been downsized. I mean, there's still a need for it, obviously. Do you think it's healthy and will continue to survive and thrive?
There's a huge need for it, and there always will be. But I think, this is my own personal opinion, that they're better off than a lot of agencies because of the cooperative funding they receive and the support. I mean, there's huge support in the agricultural community for wildlife services, especially. There's support at the airport to keep people safely flying in and out of Great Falls. I mean, so plus all these other diverse projects that they do. So I believe that they're in a lot better shape than some of the others.
Okay. Well, Mike, I appreciate you taking time to talk a little bit about the book, a little bit about your career, which has been amazing, and also get a chance to look at your sheep here.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it very much.
You've been listening to a conversation with author and retired government hunter Mike Hoggan. The Valier Area Rancher's book, Between Predator and Prey, 42 Years a Government Hunter, is available in bookstores and online. And you can follow and rate this podcast and give your feedback and guest suggestions on social media. I'll be back soon with another guest with a Montana connection. Until then, from McGonigal's Chronicles, Making Montana Connections, I'm Tim McGonigal.